scope and the judicial signature. Without any of those four, it's an invalid warrant. And again, the law enforcement agencies vary. You can have the FBI is a law enforcement agency. Your local police department is a law enforcement agency. Homeland Security is a law enforcement agency. The CIA is a law enforcement agency. So there are many agencies that constitute law enforcement in this country. And in any of those contexts, when you're in conversation with any agent from these various agencies, you have the right to an attorney when you're speaking with them. And you are not required to allow the FBI agent in your home, again, without a warrant. This includes ICE. So ICE is an agency that's under the purview of Homeland Security. They are obviously Immigration Customs Enforcement. They're the immigration officers. If they come to your home and ask to come in, the same protocol that I repeated before applies in that context. They need to have an arrest warrant for them or a search warrant for them to enter your house. Again, I hope it's being passed around, but there's an administrative warrant that ICE uses, and that looks different than a judicial warrant. An ICE warrant only requires the signature of the immigration officer. It does not require the signature of a judge. So if that signature is there, it's a valid search warrant, and you are obligated under the law to allow that ICE officer in. But again, you are not required to speak with the ICE agent if they're there without your attorney. And we always say the best clients that come to our office are the clients that act like reporters. And what that means is community members who have interactions with law enforcement or who have interactions with anyone who's partaking in discrimination. The best client is the one that records everything. So when a law enforcement agent shows up to your house, you take their name, you take the agency that they're from, and you take their badge number, and you keep that information for us to use later on for your advocacy. Okay, so again, law enforcement constitute local police. So what do you do when you're stopped by the police on the street? You must identify yourself to the police officer if he or she so asks. You don't have to answer further questions without your attorney present, even if it's a stop on the street. And if you are under arrest, if you are not under arrest, you can ask. If the answer is no, then you are free to leave, but you must respectfully ask whether or not you are free to leave. So even though, kind of like these rights that you're entitled to that I'm giving you are rights that you're entitled to by the Constitution, we always advise clients to assert those rights respectfully, because law enforcement in this country does have a lot of authority. And if they see a trace of disrespect, they can use the authority in an abusive way. And so even if you have the right to leave, if you're not under arrest, you must ask respectfully. And if they don't let you go, then you stay there until your attorney shows up. When I say you must identify yourself, that usually means taking out ID. There are two things I'd like you guys to keep in mind. If you're not a citizen of this country, I heavily advise that you do not show an ID that reflects citizenship in another country, because your rights differ as a non-citizen. What I do advise, if you're someone who's undocumented or is not a citizen of this country, is always carry a form of ID that fulfills the minimal requirement that law enforcement needs to identify you. And what that means is an ID that shows your face and your name. So preferably not the place you were born in, preferably not where you live. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you're in your car and the police stops you, we heavily advise that you keep your hands visible and you don't make any sudden movements. Again, there's an abuse of authority in this country when it comes to police. So if they kind of see you as a threat already because you're brown and Muslim in this country, you need to take extra precautions to show that you're not threatening. And that means keeping your hands visible, and when you're producing your license and registration, you narrate what you're doing. Officer, I'm reaching out to take out my license, insurance, and registration, and you keep your hands visible where the officer can see them. And again, if you're arrested or taken to the police station, you have the right to a phone call, and I advise that that phone call either be to your attorney or to a relative that knows to get you your attorney. You have the right for the attorney to be present, but you only have the right to one phone call. And if you're mistreated, again, the best thing to do is to document everything. You need to know the officer's name, write it down, the badge number, what law enforcement agency they work for, if it's local law enforcement, what precinct they're a part of. And we can do a lot for you with that information documented. And again, don't resist or act disrespectfully, even if you're being mistreated. And I know that's a heavy ask, but it's for your protection. Okay, now knowing your rights as an airline passenger. Again, so law enforcement includes Homeland Security. Homeland Security is the broad agency, and under Homeland Security, there's TSA, which are the agents that you see at the airport when you're traveling. There's CBP, same thing. When you're traveling or at the border, Customs and Border Patrol, they're under Homeland Security, and there's ICE. So if you believe you've been treated in a discriminatory way while you're traveling by an airline employee or security, TSA, CBP, or what have you, write down the name, write down their ID number or badge number, and which agency they work for. So you should know, you have the right to ask the officer, which agency are you part of? Are you part of TSA? Are you part of CBP? That information will help us file a complaint on your behalf for the discrimination that you experienced at the hands of that agent. And of course, if there are any parties or witnesses that you feel you can gather their information from, that's also heavily helpful when it comes to filing a complaint for you. Now, if another passenger on the airplane is harassing you on the plane, you contact the flight attendant, you ask to be moved, or you voluntarily leave the plane. And again, afterwards, then it's possible to file a complaint on your behalf. Now this one is kind of what's relevant to tomorrow's press conference and the lawsuit that we're filing for a number of plaintiffs in New Jersey and in other states. If you feel you're constantly being subjected to secondary screening or intense interrogation when you're traveling, that's likely a symptom that you're on a watch list. And now what this watch list does is, or how this watch list is created is quite complex, and that requires its own workshop. But it's a list compiled by law enforcement agencies that they share with each other. 98% of those names are Muslim. And so if you're on that list, then law enforcement agencies, as of now, have the right to subject you to these discriminatory practices. Hopefully with this lawsuit, the watch list will be taken apart and subjected to a judicial order requiring that they stop using this. But if you feel like you are subject to this type of treatment when you're traveling, please let us know, and we can assess whether or not you're on the watch list. And if we assess that you are likely on the watch list, then we can think about adding you to the lawsuit. This watch list also includes a no-fly list. So there's the watch list that subjects you to secondary screening or interrogation, and the second part of the watch list places people on something called the no-fly list, which means that you're prohibited from boarding any aircraft. That's kind of easier to discern if you suspect you're on that list. If you try to board a plane, you're prohibited from boarding. That likely means you're on the no-fly list. And also let us know if you feel like you've experienced that before, so that we can help. Now, your rights as an employee. There's a misconception among community members that it's kind of a privilege to work in a workplace that doesn't feel hostile or that doesn't subject you to discrimination or harassment. No, it's actually, you're entitled by law to work in a non-hostile environment. It's your right as an American, or as an employee rather, not as an American. It's your right as an employee to work in a place that's free of hostile treatment, free of discrimination. There's fairness laws in hiring practices, in firing practices, and in promotions. And if you feel like you've been discriminated against in either of those contexts, you let us know. There are laws in place to protect you. You have the right to reasonable religious accommodations in your workplace, and an employer's failure to accommodate your sincerely held religious belief is against the Constitution. So if you ask your employer to step out to pray, if you ask your employer for a prayer space, if you ask your employer for the ability to keep your hijab on throughout your employment, those are all things that your employer is entitled by law to give you. And if you feel like you've been denied that right, then you tell us. Again, the first thing that we always tell clients to do is to document everything. If there's hostility going on, record it. Record who's doing it, record what department they're from, and then submit a complaint with human resources and then come to us. So I guess, you know, the hadith that says tie your camel, that's the tie your camel version in this context. Do your part by submitting the appropriate complaint in your workplace, and then come to us so that we can handle the legal part of it.
Can I add something?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to note that employment discrimination is the largest chunk of complaints that CAIR New Jersey receives. In the back at our table, we have some print copies of our 2023 report. You can flip through it. It has the breakdown of all the cases we get. And quite clearly, employment discrimination is the biggest chunk of everything, you know, and that's including school and travel, other things we do, referrals, hate crimes. Employment is this big category. So I do recommend checking that out. You can flip through and find some examples of cases that we've worked on and what we have done. With a large number of these reports, it is difficult in assessing if a workplace meets hostile or toxic or discriminatory. But I do like to share contemporary examples. Just last week, I had a call come in, and a 75-year-old man who works at a deli was called a monkey and a terrorist by his coworker, and his boss does nothing. And this happened a year ago. And to top it off, that coworker physically assaulted the 75-year-old man who works at the deli, and the boss does nothing. And then, like tying your camel, that man, with the help of a friend, of a good Muslim, filed a police complaint, a police report. That is a case where it is entirely explicit, and that is workplace discrimination, that is unacceptable, and that is unjust. And that is why CAIR New Jersey exists.
Thanks. Okay, and I guess the advice that you heard about the etiquette you keep when you're dealing with law enforcement is the same that I would advise applies to job discrimination. If you feel like you're being treated hostilely, you remain calm. When you bring a case before a judge, the best plaintiff is the plaintiff that reacts within procedure. Someone who is not reactive, does not, respond hostilely. Someone who knows the rights and knows that their rights are not going to be lost, and to document everything. That's the best kind of client, and the client that's most likely going to have a successful court case. So again, in those contexts, we ask that you remain calm and polite while you're recording, and inform the offending party that's doing the discrimination that you believe that their actions are discriminatory. And again, document every incident immediately. We tend to forget what happens to us, or we tend to be harsh on ourselves and dismiss parts of our experiences that are actually really important, that become really important later on. So it's important that you write all those details down once they happen. Date, time, place, who was doing it, who was a witness to what was happening. And keep copies of all materials that support your claim, because that could be used, again, to strengthen your case. Using the information you collected, you can file a written complaint of discrimination with your company's human resources, and do not sign any document that your employer asks you to sign without running it by an attorney first. And do not resign from your position until you consult with an attorney as well. Those are both really important points of concern. When you sign documents that you're not aware you're signing, or the contents of which you don't understand. A lot of times we see clients coming in having already waived rights that were not aware they've waived. And so in that context, we can't do anything for them. So we ask that before you sign any documents, you bring them to our office so that we can review those documents first. And there's always the option, if you're in a workplace that has mediation, you can always request mediating your issue with the person who offended you, or ask to be transferred to a different job site altogether. Now, your rights as a student. I know this topic is probably really important to the community, and off the bat, I will say that there's a lot of law right now that's still being challenged in the court, so there's kind of limited answers I can give you. But your students have a really critical role in schools, and when they're facing harassment and discrimination, I think Dia can speak to this a lot. There's a lot of cases that come into our office that pertain to bullying in school, bullying based on your religious identity or your ethnicity. It's on the rise for sure. The best thing that we can do is be a part of the process of addressing the bullying or the harassment with school administration. But it's really important to keep students aware of their rights, because their voice speaks the loudest in their school. So we can help insofar as we can come and accompany the family and advocate with the school administration on the student's behalf. But the student's voice actually goes further than a lawyer does, because the administration has the administration is entitled to listen to the voice of the student that's enrolled in that school. Do you want to give some context to that?
Again, if you check our print version of the 2023 report, it does note that from 2021 to 2022, in terms of the data, the number of complaints that we received that relates to schools, K through 12, university, increased 3 times, it tripled. So that is also a trend that was confirmed also by the CAIR National Network across the country. That was something that was highlighted across the board, just an increase in complaints and issues in schools, and of course bullying especially.
Yeah, I think we are under the impression that our society is moving in a progressive trajectory, but the numbers that we see speak very much otherwise. Like, bullying is on the rise, airline harassment is on the rise, law enforcement abuse is on the rise. So it's really important that you come to our office when you're dealing with any of this, because there are ways of remedying your situation, and no situation is too small to address. So if you feel like you have a child in school that's experiencing something that your gut is telling you is wrong, let us know so that we can help you make that determination whether or not it meets the level of bullying or discrimination that we would be able to get involved in, because it's hard on the kids. It takes a lot on a kid to come home and tell their parents something happened to them, and it usually ends up that the child does express feelings of harm when it's gotten to a level that they can't keep it in anymore. It's usually not at the first incident. It usually happens at the third or fourth incident when it's really bad. So just keep your eyes out, speak to your children when they come home from school, ask them, what went on that day, if they felt like they had a comfortable day at school. And it's important to let them know that an organization like ours exists so that they can feel safe in their classroom. And believe it or not, sometimes these cases come to our office and the offending party is the teacher or the principal, not another student. And so, that makes matters worse for the kid, but it makes kind of the way we engage with the issue stronger when it's someone as high up in authority as a teacher or a principal.
Another big thing in public schools is the right to prayer. That's something that may be forgotten about by students while they're in school sometimes, but some students, Allahumma barik, they want to make sure that they're on their deen and that they're getting their prayers in. So the right to pray can be fulfilled, should be fulfilled. We have schools where the Muslim students organized and they advocated for themselves to even have Jummah prayer in the school, in the public school. They take a break, okay, we're gonna go pray Jummah now. Of course, they have to take a reasonable amount of time, and they can't do like an hour-long khutbah, and then then they're praying all their sunnahs and everything like that. Allahumma barik, but there's a balance. But if there are any students or if your children are very passionate about this and advocating for this in their public school, we can offer guidance as well.
We also find that schools with a Muslim Students Association, the issues that the students deal with kind of resolves faster in a more efficient way when there's a Muslim Students Association on campus. So if you have kids in school or if you have kids in university, we heavily advise that if there is no Muslim Students Association, that they get together and form one. That's kind of a way of forming an internal advocacy group for them, and we can advise them on how to advocate for issues that they're dealing with in a way that protects their rights, in a way that keeps them safe. But again, their voice goes a long way when they're advocating, but we can help equip them to make sure that they're advocating in a strategic way.
Okay, get involved. Obviously, we have local, state, national elections. Every November, there's something up for election in New Jersey. You can donate objective, well-written books and multimedia material about Islam to local public and school libraries. You can get involved in local government advocacy. I mean, many towns have different boards, planning boards, zoning boards. These are very important. Even masajid have issues with these boards. So it's important to be involved in these boards as well, if not more important. You can get involved in national government. You can call or write to your representatives and ask them to protect the rights of Muslim Americans. We often put out action alerts. We put out an action alert, and then there's a way, okay, you click this, put in your information, bam, it sends an email to the congressperson. So we do that on some big issues, but you can always do that. You can always call your congressperson's office, and they have someone sitting there who writes down, okay, this person was talking about such and such bill, and they were in favor, or they were against, and why. They do that. And you can also contact the CAIR New Jersey office by calling 908-668-5900, or you can email us at info@nj.cair.com. You can request a Know Your Rights workshop. Generally, you can follow along with what we're doing online. We have a lot of different events, big things and small things, and anyone can get involved.
And for the children or university students that are interested, we do have internship programming at CAIR. So if any of your kids are interested in interning for us, we do have, I think it's the winter applications that are coming up? Yeah.
So we do 6-month terms for the interns, and we have grown our internship program. We have 6 interns currently. Potentially we'll have more for next term, which starts in January. So we're going to put out the application in a month, inshallah, a month and a half, inshallah, for the next term. And so these are some of the positions that are relevant. The names might change, we might have more, but these are examples. Legal research, editorial writing, government affairs, graphic design, program development, grant management. We currently have legal intern. We have an operations intern. And we kind of assess the needs every 6 months or so. But these university students are heavily involved in our work and gaining great experience.
I think it's your slides.
Okay, and then you can engage with us, like I said before. You can see what's going on, what we're doing. Also, share your voice with us. As the much earlier slide said, that CAIR serves as an institution to protect the others. We are here to serve you. So, we also want to hear what you have to say. We have a newsletter sign up. It's everything that's going on. We try not to spam. We also need volunteers for small events. If we're going to a masjid and we're tabling and we're trying to disseminate information, what is CAIR, our services, free legal aid, etc., or a big event like going to Trenton or the Muslim Youth Leadership Intensive, we need people for that. There's a lot going on. We have 100 high school students running around, so we need people, and volunteers are welcome.
Oh, I forgot to also add, our interns are paid interns, so they do have a stipend to kind of encourage the Muslim youth to engage with an organization such as ours. The nonprofit world is usually limited in resources, and we very much are limited in resources, but we do make it a priority to budget for paying our interns for the work that they do. I think there's a deficit in our youth's interest in civil rights and in community work. And a lot of that disinterest comes from a lack of financial motivation. That's really important to us, the financial part of it. Just as we take care of our employees in terms of financial compensation, our interns are also very well compensated.
Support CAIR New Jersey, everyone's least favorite slide. Again, we're a nonprofit organization, so we exist to serve the community, and we exist because of the community. So donations are, very well needed and very well appreciated. Alhamdulillah. These are just some ways that people can donate, and there's more information on our website. This is an example of a flyer that we've sent to many masajid. The CAIR is the nation's oldest and largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. Have you experienced discrimination in New Jersey for being Muslim? Fired or mistreated at work, bullied in school, profiled at the airport, targeted by law enforcement, harassed in public? Anything else? We're here to help, and we'll see what we can do, inshallah. Online, we have a report and incident form. That is usually the best way. So you can go on our website and report something that happened, the workplace, at school, anything like that. You put in your information, you'll get a call back, inshallah, and then we'll go from there. You can learn more. We have this scanning option that has a booklet that summarizes everything we've talked about and has even more details. So that's something you could scan. I think we have some copies in the back.
Yeah, it's good to keep handy if you forget anything that we've reviewed today, to have this on your phone, so that the rules, the golden rules that I reminded you of, your rights in these various contexts. It's good to have this pamphlet handy if you want to scan the QR code.
Let's give it like 10 more seconds to scan.
All right.
Okay, now the best part. Jazakumullahu khairan. Any questions? And direct all questions to our attorney, not me.
Oh, yes, brother. Thanks. Of course.
As you know, it's a very hard issue in school these days, and the gender issues. How CAIR is helping community and students? And as you know, you might be listening to all the community activists. The Board of Education, are the controversies on Muslim students attending these classes? Yes or no? And LGBT and gender. So how is, I don't see anything with the reference to CAIR.
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to earlier. Those issues on a legal level They're still being litigated in court. There's no kind of law that entitles a parent's involvement in that sort of situation. That's still being challenged up in court. So there's not much I can give you in terms of like what you're entitled to by law. It's still in flux. However, it differs from district to district. If you have a class that you do not feel you are comfortable having your kid be a part of, we do have a template opt-out form that you can use to advocate for your child's opting out of a class that you don't feel comfortable having your child present during. Things get a little bit more complicated when issues of gender and sexuality that you may not feel comfortable having your child exposed to is embedded within core curriculum. So if your child's in a math or English class and that sort of subject is weaved into the curriculum of math and English, which are core subjects, those are not classes that you can opt your child out of, unfortunately, and that's just the reality of living here. But in terms of engaging with administration on the topic generally, outside of what you're legally entitled to, that's definitely something that we can assist with outside of the opt-out template letter.
I just said don't direct any questions at me, but this one I'll answer because somehow I am actually a school board member in my town. So I have some like relevant knowledge about this stuff. When it comes to this topic, is in many cases not necessarily a civil rights violation upon the Muslim. And that's the problem that we face when we're dealing with these issues. And then if we go after them and we chase these issues and we have no actual legal grounding whatsoever, then we just look like bigots ourselves. And it's something difficult that we're also trying to navigate. Since 1986 in New Jersey, you have the right. It is your choice as a parent whether or not to keep your child in their sex education program or to take them out entirely or for specific lessons. Really at any age, if there's a specific class or unit that's for that, you can opt out for that. As our attorney Aya was talking about with the embedment of certain elements into the curriculum of other classes, that is another piece that is, well, a contemporary problem that has come about in the last few years, and it's not necessarily a civil rights violation. Examples of what could be a civil rights violation. Let's say there is a certain function going on, and the teacher is trying to force your child to wear something that they don't believe in or goes against their beliefs. No, your child doesn't have to wear that item. Or if your child does not want to participate in such a function or respectfully is not trying to participate, and the teacher or other students then bully or kind of mistreat your child because of that or ostracize your child for not being part of the group, then we have a problem potentially as well.
Okay, yeah.
You mentioned in the suit tomorrow, the no-fly list or the watch list, 98% are Muslims. So I presume that's an accurate number. So you guys went over that list and came up with that number?
So there was a leaked version of that list from 2019 that CAIR was able to get a hold of. And so, yeah, an analysis of the list was made, and it was determined on that analysis that 98% of the names on that list are Muslim names. There's a small percentage, 2% or so, that's, guerrilla warfare groups or international, members of fringe, groups, but 98% are individual names of Muslim or Muslim-sounding names. Did I see it? Yeah.
Where your office is located?
We're on Broad Street in Newark. We used to be in South Plainfield, closer to you here.
For any case, you charge any fees?
No, it's all pro bono. Free legal services are free, so long as, of course, they fall within the scope of our work, which is civil rights. It's free services.
We cannot handle real estate or divorce cases unless the judge is discriminating against you, but please, we cannot do that.
maybe hopefully in the future with more resources, we can serve as like the community legal group where we can serve all sorts of cases. But of course, we have to keep our resources very targeted. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned several times contact your attorney. What happens if someone doesn't have an attorney? Do you usually contact CAIR attorney?
Yes. Yeah. Usually, if we have community members who are, for example, detained at the airport or being interrogated, if you reach out, so this is complicated. Usually, we get a phone call internally about someone being interrogated or detained at the airport, and we do get involved even at various hours of the day or night. So I would suggest you still leave a voicemail.
So you mean attorney would go physically to the airport to?
If it's in New Jersey, yeah, in Newark. Otherwise, we'll connect you with another CAIR chapter that is in the state that you're detained in. So if you're detained at JFK, we can contact a CAIR attorney for CAIR New York. Or if you're detained at Dulles in DC, we'll contact CAIR National. If you leave a voicemail, yes. A lot of times we get it through word of mouth. Someone's relative contacted someone else who contacted someone they know in CAIR. And that's how we kind of become aware that someone's detained. But definitely always leave a voicemail. Because even in the event that we can't make it to the airport or we don't get to your message in time, we can follow up with you to see, one, if you're still detained by the next day, or how to file the complaint for you.
It's also helpful sometimes if there's a lot going on, if you have like a big story to tell, if you have documents to fill out the form on the website. I know that the form on the website feels a little impersonal or like unhuman. You know, there's that lack of connection, but it will really move things forward, expedite things, inshallah.
I also forgot to add that if you feel like you are profiled while traveling, or you know that you're likely going to be taken in for secondary screening or interrogated, because you often are, if you contact our office, we can provide you with an attorney representation form and a carry-on letter that reflects my representation of you. Usually when you present that to a CBP agent, they're required to call me to answer your question, brother. The agent will be required to contact me in order to carry on with an interrogation. And either that stops them from interrogating you, or it limits their time in interrogating you. Yeah.
Sometimes the interrogation happens before boarding a plane in foreign territory, so when you come here, they don't do it here. I don't know if it's in Canada or some of the countries, at the time of boarding the plane is where they do that screening. Can you guys reach out to that CBP agent in that foreign country? Like I'm thinking in Toronto.
Yeah.
At the time of boarding the plane in Toronto, in Canada, anywhere in Canada, that's when they'll do the screening.
Yeah.
So when you land here, you're free.
Yeah, yeah. That actually, brother, that pertains to the watch list. There are there are ports of entry. So there are border ports of entry and then airport ports of entry. Like legally, they're called ports of entry that are actually manned by Homeland Security, or they have a relationship with U.S. Homeland Security. Canada airports are one of them. UAE, Istanbul Airport, Amman. Those various ports of entry are manned by CBP agents. So if you're on the watch list, you will likely be interrogated at those airports as well. So our representation letter that you would carry with you would be you effectively telling them you can't interrogate me without my attorney present. So that they would be required to have us on the line while executing the interrogation. Now, whether or not they comply is something else, because they do have broad authority to do what they feel like is in the best interest of national security. And so that's where the problem arises. But, you know, even if they do go with the interrogation, despite you having the representation letter, we can then use your interrogation to kind of boost the complaint we would file against that agent, because you are, you know, constitutionally entitled to an attorney in those spaces. Any questions, sisters?
Okay, I was gonna say the same thing.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Jazakumullahu khair. Please visit our table in the back, take some free stuff, information,
Pizza.
and I think it's time to eat more pizza. Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.